the Isles of Scilly, scene of 1,000 shipwrecks, and I'm here to bring you just a few of those stories. The Cockney Buccaneer. Right, this is a video about a discovery I made in 1999. It's a little montage of some of the things that went on after I made the discovery. This is my first ever shipwreck find.
Back in 1796, a British diplomat based in Italy, Sir William Hamilton, had gathered a collection of priceless artefacts for the British Museum. The only problem was how to get them home. So Hamilton's friend, Admiral Horatio Nelson, offered to give them a lift on one of his warships. So the priceless vases were loaded onto the 170-foot, 1,700-ton ship of the line, HMS Colossus. The Colossus was a powerful 74-gun Royal Navy warship. On her way home in 1798, she tried to take shelter from a fierce storm just off the Isles of Scilly. But her anchor line snapped and she was driven into dangerously shallow waters, where she sank. In the 1970s, the front section of the Colossus was found and divers recovered ancient Greek pottery fragments. The British Museum restored a handful of the priceless ancient vases, dating from 440 BC. But they were only a small part of the treasure that was on board. Carpenter Todd Stevens is a scuba diver who spent years searching the area for shipwrecks. And in 1999, he made an extraordinary new discovery. More than half a kilometre away from the known Colossus site, Todd discovered a whole new section of the ship, with artefacts everywhere.
It just looked like a piece of rotten old iron, and it was the sort of thing I would have sometimes looked at and gone, rubbish.
After careful restoration, this object was revealed to be an 18th century flintlock pistol. Flintlock pistols were the workhorse of the Royal Navy and saw action for over 200 years, a vital weapon in the bloody action of boarding enemy ships.
Pretty much everybody went over the side with their cutlasses and their muskets and pikes and pistols. The officers quite often had two, and as they went over the side, they would disperse them first, and then they would spin them over like this and use it as a club. And actually, if you hold that and feel the weight of that end.
That is terrifying, to think that you're on this massive wooden ship and you're that close to someone that you have to club them to death.
Yeah, it was pretty nasty stuff.
I'm going to take a dive to see where Todd found the pistol and discover what other treasures the wreck still contains.
We're going to dive the stern section, which is here. We shall go up and go along the guns that are standing up off the seabed.
They're still in situ, exactly where they landed when the ship first went down.
Exactly. So this hasn't been touched.
I can't wait to get down there and actually see it for myself. The wreck of the Colossus is at a depth of 15 metres, just off the island of Samson.
This thing's sticking up in front of me. I think that's a cannon. Wow, look at that. Todd, that is cool. Wow, look at this. You can actually see it's like a ship laid flat onto the seabed. It's incredible to think that this timber is over 200 years old and she survived just in 15 metres of seawater. So normally on a site like this, one cannon itself would be amazing and quite a cool find. But I look 3 metres on and there's another cannon. Also sunk into the seabed, nose down.
The evidence at the wreck site helps us build up a picture of what happened to the Colossus in that fateful storm. The wind and waves pushed the mighty ship onto the rocks. She rolled onto her side, lost her masts, and the enormous hull was torn apart. The front bow section sank almost half a mile away from the rear stern section. Over the years, the superstructure has been broken down, leaving this slice of her stern, port side down, that we can still see today. The timbers and the pins that held her together are still clearly visible.
They are some serious spikes. Look at them just lying on the bottom.
These deadly-looking pins are a metre of solid copper. Thousands of them formed the skeleton that held Colossus's mighty frame together. The wreck of the Colossus is still being carefully excavated, and it continues to offer new discoveries.
Is that a musket? That's the trigger.
After 200 years submerged, this is an amazing find. Muskets like this would have been used with our pistol in the desperate fights to board enemy ships.
So this is the concretion, this is the seabed, sort of congealing together with the metal. So it's incredibly thick, but you know that the actual musket and the barrel are inside. And there's another one here. Wow. It's such a relatively small artefact, but to find it on the seabed, exactly where it fell in 1798, in the middle of a winter storm. It's artefacts like this that really bring this site to life, that really evoke a sense of what those sailors had to suffer. It's a good job they got to Samson, otherwise they'd be lying down here with the musket as well.
That was an awesome dive. Takes you a minute just to get your eye in, but once you start to see the detail, it's like the plan of a beautiful wooden 18th century ship just laid out on the seabed.
This is what you go diving for. Something like that is, there's nothing better in my book. Just touching it when you know the story behind a wreck like that. To touch that history is just something else.
The Colossus site is a protected wreck. You need a licence to dive it, and now it's illegal to remove any artefacts.
It's incredible to think that a ship the size of HMS Colossus, from the time of Napoleon and Nelson, lay there for over 200 years undiscovered. It reminds me that Britain is awash with treasures, and the treasures under the sea are the most secret of all.
One of the best and fastest warships of the British Navy. 200 years ago, HMS Colossus was part of Nelson's fleet before she sank in rough seas off the Isles of Scilly. Now, a huge carved statue recovered from the wreck has been restored and returned to the island. John Kay has had an exclusive first glimpse.
It's been described as one of the greatest discoveries in decades. On the seabed, a giant wooden statue from HMS Colossus. 10 years ago, divers Todd and Carmen Stevens couldn't believe their eyes. Now, for the first time, they're going to see the carving out of the water and fully restored.
I can't wait to see it. I'm really excited about it.
It's been a long time coming. It's the only one in existence. There's nothing else like it in the world.
It's unique.
Colossus sank right here, 1 mile off the island of Tresco. On this reconstruction, you can see the carved godlike statue on the stern of the gunship. He inspired and protected the crew during several key battles. And now, after years of painstaking restoration work, that carving is back on Tresco.
Blimey.
It's an emotional reunion with their old friend. And for the first time, they can see all 12 feet of him, dried out and almost perfect.
The sailors would have walked right by looking at this. Nelson would have looked at it. He'd have walked past the ship when they were loading it, and see this would have been just above him.
I'm just really, really touched that, that it is back on Scilly. I just didn't think I'd see it again.
The carving will be displayed here at the Island Shipwreck Museum.
Anybody in the world would want it. I'm sure the British Museum would love it, and lots of private collectors would love to have it in their own collections, but we've got it here.
Just look at how well preserved these intricate carvings are. And historians say it's remarkable that the whole thing remains intact after more than 200 years in notoriously rough seas. The question now, what else is out there? John Kay, BBC News, Tresco.
It lies 30 feet down, unaware of the controversy it stirred above water. This giant anchor found off the Isles of Scilly is at the centre of a dispute over where it came from. A shipwreck hunter says it belongs to one of Nelson's warships, HMS Colossus.
I've got a whole list of what anchors go on what ships, the size 74 gun, 90 gun, 100 gun, and what size they would be. And this matches exactly.
But a maritime historian says it's from a much earlier wreck, HMS Association. An anchor from that was discovered by the Royal Navy in the 1960s and left on the seabed in the area of the latest find.
We have documentary evidence of the logbook of the diving team there at the time who did the work.
The Colossus sank in a storm in 1798, not far from the island of Samson. She was returning from a battle against Napoleon's fleet. Richard Larn is convinced the anchor is from HMS Association, which sank off the Scillies in 1707 with 3 other ships. What happened to the wrecks is now history, but the war of words over the 2 warships continues today, both above and below the surface. Steve Hardy, ITV News, the Scillies.
If you want to know anything more about this wreck, then you can read my book, Wreck of the Colossus, which is can be found on Kindle and Amazon or directly from me.